Okay, so I'm going to talk about the fast ferry proposal that is possibly going to come to Tacoma. Now, this is an ever evolving story because basically, as you know, the city had, along with the Port of Tacoma, had actually helped finance and some others finance this actual study to see if it was feasible to have a Tacoma to Seattle fast ferry passenger route. This would only deal with people boarding the ferry and going from here over to Seattle, and it would not involve cars. So that study was done. Now remember, this is a site that includes 4 different locations. It's Point Defiance Park is one of them, Old Town, which has a dock, Foss Seaport, and 11th Street as part of the particular areas, right? And also Point Ruston. Now, I wasn't aware that Foss Seaport was one of the considerations. Excuse me. Sorry, getting over some sickness here. But I wasn't aware that the Foss Seaport was one of those particular areas. Now, Foss, if you guys don't know, it's called the Foss Waterway downtown. And so there is a Seaport museum and that type of thing right there. It's downtown as well. Now, before I said I wanted 11th Street to be the actual location, I still agree. I think that 11th Street makes the most sense. But also Foss Seaport could also be a good option. I, again, don't think that Old Town, Point Ruston, or Point Defiance would be the best choice. Now there's been an estimate that talks more about, this estimate that actually came out shows a whole lot more and talked a whole lot more than what was given prior to this. Now this was updated on the 21st. So yesterday, got this information. Now, what they're also considering is that if they connect between here and Seattle, the boats would actually possibly go around Vashon Island. And if they choose an eastern route or a western route around the island, that changes a lot of different things, right? If they go around the eastern side of Vashon Island, they could possibly stop in the city of Des Moines. Okay, that could be another potential stop where they can add to the route. Now, this would be great for Des Moines because obviously people there still go up to Seattle to work. And right now, the only thing that they have to rely on is buses as far as public transportation. So this would also be a way to help ease traffic congestion, and it would give the folks in Des Moines an option to come down to Tacoma. It's a boon for that community because they would be connected to both Seattle and Tacoma via the fast ferry. Now, they're looking at 2020, and they're saying estimates have Point Ruston with having the highest daily ridership, okay, at about 523 people. But they're saying by 2040, so in 2020, 523 people if you choose Point Ruston. And we all know that Point Ruston has a lot of amenities and great options and all of that. But I don't think it's the best choice. It's away from everything. And already parking is a concern there just with private development. So I think adding something like this just does not help the situation. But by 2040, they're saying the 11th Street dock location would catch up to that same figure. Okay? Now, I think that they're undershooting this quite a bit. I think that if they were to build this in at the 11th Street dock, I guarantee probably that it would exceed 523 riders. There's so many people who travel between here and Seattle. I would imagine 523 would be surpassed. Now, it could be that they're lowballing this, obviously, to make sure that projections are not figured so high. We also have to consider how much the cost is going to be as far as tickets. Because that does change things. If tickets are so expensive, and someone pointed out $11 one way is very expensive, and I agree. I think that's very steep. If it's too expensive, people won't take it. Now, they're looking at this and they're deciding the size of vessel, because remember I said it depends on the size of the vessel, and that's going to change operating costs. It's going to change location. It's going to change the size of the terminal that has to be built. So they're saying a vessel that could carry 150 people would have a cost of a capital cost of about $10 to $13.2 million. Okay? If we add an extra 100 people to this and have a 250 passenger boat, it would cost between $13 to $17.5 million. Okay? Now, if they're going to choose the Washington State Ferry slip, which is right there in Point Defiance, and that slip goes from basically Tacoma over to Vashon Island. Excuse me, I have to scratch my foot. If they choose that particular location, it would be, they would have a lot of infrastructure already there, but not complete. If they do that, they would have to have a much bigger vessel, and they would have to choose the 250 passenger boat, just based on how everything is designed. Okay, so they would need the larger vessel if they were to actually do the Washington State Ferry slip. Okay, startup cost by landing site would be $40 million if they chose the 11th Street location, $41.4 million for Old Town, $42.6 at Point Ruston, $42.4 million at Point Defiance Park, and $53.3 million for the Washington State Ferry site at Point Defiance. That gives you an idea. So just looking at that, to me, Point Defiance is out altogether, because no matter which option you choose, it's the most expensive. It's $42.4 million just for capital cost, just the startup cost alone. The cheapest option is $42 million. The other one is $53.3 million for the Washington State Ferry site, and you need a larger vessel. Okay, when we look at the annual operating cost, the 11th Street location is $2.98 million. The Old Town location would be $2.9 million, so it would be $800,000 cheaper. For Point Ruston, it'd be $2.84 million, and Point Defiance, $2.83 million. Okay, the fare box recovery rate is just about $1 million for each site, between 32 to 37%. So the fare box would cover a lot of the operating costs. So it would cover about $1 million of that. Still, if you subtract $1 million from it, the routes are still going to be just operating. Downtown will still be probably at about $2 million to operate a ferry route service from there. The cheapest option is Point Ruston, and you're still going to be close to that $2 million mark. It'll be $1.83 million. So there's not a lot of difference there, in my opinion. The subsidy required for 11th Street location is $1.96 million, with a cost per rider at $28.77, and it would cost about $1,400 a service hour, meaning that every hour that that vessel is moving, it's going to cost $1,431. Sorry. And I know the microphone's right here, and you guys got to hear that, so I apologize. The subsidy for Old Town would be $1.88 million, and the cost per rider at $27.88. So basically, it would be a little less, almost $1 cheaper if it was at Old Town, okay, for riders. And the cost per service hour is at $1,394. So basically $1,400. Point Ruston, it would be a subsidy of $1.71 million with a cost per rider at $24.80. And a cost per service hour at $1,364. Okay, a subsidy for Point Defiance would be $1.79 million with a cost per rider at $26.70, and the cost per hour is $1,362. Okay, so to do my math here, I'm going to ask Google, because I don't have a calculator, what the difference is in terms of the cost per service hour between 11th Street at the most expensive versus Point Defiance, which is the most cost effective. Okay, Google, What's $1,431 minus $1,362?
The answer is $69.
Okay, so the difference is only $69 in operating cost per hour between Point Defiance versus 11th Street. To me, that doesn't, $69 doesn't make much difference there. And so I'm going to have on our website, go in our description box, there will be a link to our actual website where you can look at this entire study, and it talks about the startup capital costs for each different location. And it pretty much talks about where the station would be and how it would look and all of that. And you can kind of take a glance at that and see what would be the best. Again, Washington State Ferry would be the biggest. You would need 3 vessels. They're basing this on 3 actual vessels. It would carry the most people because it would have 250. It would be a 250 passenger ferry. So it would be the biggest out of those. The other locations, 11th Street, Old Town, Point Ruston, Point Defiance, all of those would use the 150 seat ferry. And again, this is based on using 3 of them. 11th Street is the cheapest capital cost. When you look at everything, even when you factor everything in, it's still the most effective. Let's go back to where it says... Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let me go back up and find the information that I'm looking for. Larger vessels needed for the Washington Ferry. Capital cost $40 million at 11th Street. Okay, so here's the difference here. Let's take a look at this. Okay, let's take a look at this. I'm just going to do Point Ruston. Okay, Google. What's the difference between $40.6 million minus $42.4 million?
I don't know how to help with that yet.
All right, hold on. Let me do this correctly. Okay, Google. What is $42.4 million minus $40.6 million?
Sorry, I'm not sure how to help.
It doesn't have it. But anyhow, the difference is probably a little over $1 million, right? I don't know how to, I can't do the math just right this second. But we're talking over $1 million difference in terms of just getting things started if we're looking at Point Defiance. When we're looking at any of these other options, you're still going to fork over a lot of money just getting it started. What do I think? I think that basically when you compile every piece of information and based on the location, and 11th Street has a lot of options there in terms of parking. It has everything going for it in terms of just the population base and all of that. I think you're going to probably do better at 11th Street. I think Point Defiance is clearly out of it. When you look at the entire scope of everything, when you look at the study, it doesn't make any sort of sense to actually start at Point Defiance. Whether they start at the Washington State Ferry side of it or they even build a completely different terminal, I think it's out of it. And also, I'd be a little bit concerned about the traffic going through Point Defiance Park, which is already getting a lot of traffic anyway because of the zoo and various other activities in that park. The road system is not designed for a lot of traffic, to be honest with you. A lot of people don't really go to Vashon that much, so it's a little bit different. But going to and from Seattle, I think this would add a lot of cars to a very narrow amount of streets that are through that particular park. I think it's not a good idea. Old Town is actually Point Ruston would be the second most expensive to actually get started. You're dealing with a lot of different issues when you're talking about Point Ruston in terms of just where it's actually located. Same thing with Old Town. These are areas that are not very protected in terms of the waterway. When you come into downtown, you have to look at it. That area is very well protected, right? That's why there's marinas and everything right there, because that land is protected by different, from land, it's protected with different items that are actually out there to actually break up the water so that you don't have a lot of strong wakes. And that's why they're able to put down a marina. Obviously there's several. They're able to put down a seaport operation there, which they have a dock for that. And you're also seeing a lot of people do paddleboarding because there's not a lot of strong wakes within that area. So the cost just to actually build at the 11th Street location is by far cheaper than it would be with these other locations. Now, it's not like we're along the ocean and you have massive waves crashing all the time. That's not the case. But still, with these small passenger ferries, they're not like the big giant Washington ferries that you see all over the area. These are massive ships. These 150 passenger vessels are tiny in comparison. So all of those things have to be looked at. All of those things add into the cost. All of those things add into the amount of fuel being used. Yeah, Point Ruston and Point Defiance is kind of closer. I mean, when you look at the map, it's actually closer to Seattle if you're taking a ferry than it would be downtown. So that's why, to a great degree, it's cheaper to get there, because you're actually closer. However, everything else adds into the cost of that. So again, I think the 11th Street is going to be probably the best option. It just makes the most sense. It should be downtown, in my opinion. Again, go to our website, and then you'll be able to actually take a look for yourself exactly what came up out of this report. They just now released it. Again, I think the estimates that they have for ridership is pretty low, but again, that depends on if they're going to have tickets that are $30 for people to take. If that's the case, it's probably not going to be that successful. There needs to be a lot of subsidies placed towards this to bring the price down. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope that it wasn't that confusing. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.